by this video. Basically, we started with Galloway, who was arguing that the West has always been destabilizing the Middle East, and there was a democratic movement going on, but he supported this without intervention of the West, because he said, okay, the West that didn't bring any good news in the Middle East, so this should be a popular movement, a people's movement. What Clinton now is advocating is to support the uprising in Syria under leadership of again the Muslim Brotherhood, to actually force Assad to step aside and make step aside for a democratic election. Now, Assad didn't want to do that, and Russia is actually blocking this officially, according to this article. It is because Russia has a stake in Syria, because it's the only ally they have. They have a naval base. They have a good customer in Syria, and that's why they don't want to let go. But the question is also, why is America so eager in getting involved in this in this conflict? What is their interest? So, looking at the Arab Spring from the United States, and they say that, okay, this is just a travesty. This is Russia is evil here. Now, the next video is actually going to show Russian television about the role of the United States in yeah, it's again he's stopped. It's so hard. Arab Spring. McCain.
Washington has strongly backed the Libyan opposition since the revolutionary wave engulfed the state. It's now equally enthusiastic in its support against Syria's President Bashar al-Assad, but the concern is whether America's decision to take sides could backfire on its closest Middle East ally, Israel. RT's Ganesh Shikan looks at the possible repercussions of U.S. policy.
As nations in the Middle East and North Africa are torn between the struggle to bring about change and the struggle not to let that change ruin their lives, Washington views the Arab Spring as an opportunity to finally see some of its longtime foes crumble.
Even though Iran is not an Arab country, the Arab Spring could spread to...
Absolutely. And I think in many ways it's a matter of time before that kind of change, reform, and revolution occurs in Iran.
Under the umbrella of Arab revolutions, Washington is also beating the drums of regime change in Syria, Iran's closest ally in the region. Violence within the country has been widely condemned. Countries like Russia and China call for both sides in Syria to talk and end the bloodshed, while America is blaming Assad alone.
The transition to democracy in Syria has begun, and it's time for Assad to get out of the way.
I think Assad's days, just like Gaddafi, are numbered.
Let's hope that Bashar Assad is next in line.
They've overthrown Gaddafi. They're going to have a proxy or client government in Tripoli. The next step is Syria. They want to overthrow Syria next, to take advantage of any movement that exists in Syria to overthrow the Assad government. Not to have a more democratic government, a more humane government, but a government that is allied with the United States. And after Syria, the next target will be Iran itself.
Watching regimes go down one by one, American politicians are filled with new hopes and aspirations. Some went as far as to predict the Arab Spring would spread all across the world.
What this is all about is the Arab Spring, and Bashar Assad is next. And even places like China and Russia and other places, they are very uneasy. This is about people aspiring for freedom, and that's what the Libyan people have just achieved.
It's wishful thinking on the part of John McCain, but it speaks volumes to where the real orientation is in Washington, not just of the Republicans, but the Democrats too. I believe that the United States government feels, in the aftermath of the collapse of the Soviet Union 20 years ago, this year, that there's one single power left in the world. So they would like to overthrow the government in China. They would like to overthrow the government in Russia. They would like to overthrow the government in Venezuela, in Cuba, or wherever people are independent of the dictates of Washington. But I think it's a fantasy.
But when it comes to Syria and Iran, Washington doesn't seem to be just fantasizing about revolutions. It actively fosters the process by pledging support for anti-government movements there. But some say this might eventually turn against America's closest ally in the region, Israel.
If you were to see the rise of a popular revolution with very extreme Islamic fundamentalist elements there, what you have with Hamas could essentially spread to many more places, and then you'd have a much larger population base in an extremely hostile position towards the very existence of Israel.
By throwing its support behind revolution makers, analysts say Washington is seeking to increase its influence and control in these countries.
Let's look at how things have been in the control department so far. Egypt. Thousands protest against the U.S.-backed military there that's still in power. Last week, Egyptians stormed the Israeli embassy, enraged by the killing of 5 Egyptian border guards. In Libya, a Washington-supported leadership is taking over, but the country is at risk of plunging into tribal war. Syria, the opposition includes those with radical agendas. So the aftermath of the so-called Arab Spring remains very murky and difficult. Yet Washington seems to be using the Arab Spring to fulfill its long-time goals. But the fear is it might end up getting the opposite of what it wishes for and undermining the whole region. I'm going to check out reporting from Washington.
I can't catch up this video. What they're talking about?
They're talking about that the United States is using the Arab Spring movement and using everything to destabilize the region by simply pledging support to the rebel movement. They are actually stimulating the conflict, and they're promoting rebels to grab arms and create bloodshed. Now, they are not really in favor of, they're probably not even, if it would actually materialize, if the rebels would actually take control, then this could maybe not lead to a democracy, but to a dangerous situation where extremists take power, and that could further destabilize the region. And actually, this is kind of what happened. So Americans really did this. They really supported this. They really tried to move and say, oh, the Arab Spring and this, that, and the other. But they were not really interested in who was going to succeed, right? They would just say, okay, well, it's good, democratic movement. But last week you asked the question, or last Monday you asked the question, or last week, I don't clearly remember. But is that really a good movement? What we saw with Sisi, for example.
America is they do not have intention finally what's going to be, but they try to Arab area unstable.
Right.
That was their intention.
Right.
But they don't consider what the conclusion is going to be.
No, exactly. So they by doing that, they by giving their support, they're encouraging people to rise up against their government. Now, the government of Assad was pretty terrible, but the alternative is also not that great. So the viewpoint of Russia and the viewpoint of China was, okay, we want to promote a dialogue instead of a revolution, because a revolution is just going to lead to bloodshed, and the outcome of that revolution is very uncertain in terms of
Which revolution?
the revolution in Syria.
In Syria?